So welcome everybody. My name is Chantal Cook. I'm the CEO of NALP. We're talking today about the evolving role of the paralegal. And my guest today is Faith Kelly, who is a senior manager at the Sellick Partnership. And we're going to be talking to her in just a second about her role, but also her experience of seeing how the paralegal role has been evolving. I'll come to that in just a moment. In the meantime, I'll also introduce you to Nigel, who heads up marketing at NALP as well. He's also on this webinar. And if there are any problems in the background or you've got a question that doesn't relate specifically to Faith's expertise, but you need a link or you're having a technical problem, then just pop it in the chat to Nigel and he'll be able to sort that out. So this is a really interesting one because obviously for a long time, paralegals haven't really been given the respect that they deserve. So now, seeing that paralegals, the respect and the kudos of being a paralegal is definitely improving, it is really interesting to someone who's seeing that firsthand and to understand that kind of evolving role of the paralegal. So I'd very much like to welcome Faith from the Sellick Partnership to our webinar today. And I'm going to start, Faith, by jumping straight in and asking you to tell us a little bit about your role.
Yeah, of course. So hi everyone, I am Faith. I am a senior manager at Sellick Partnership. I've been with the business for 8 years and I manage the permanent private practice division. So we focus across all areas of law, all different levels, but I focus specifically within the Thames Valley market.
And you're kind of focusing specifically on recruitment. So with your kind of recruitment hat on, when did you first start noticing this trend to paralegals wanting to progress, but not necessarily wanting to progress to do an SQE and become a solicitor, but going, actually, you know what, this is my career. I'm a paralegal and I'm proud of it.
I think since I've been in recruitment, there have always been the odd sort of career paralegal that I have come across and had conversations with. But I feel like as firms are trying to be a little bit more forward thinking, they're probably growing, they've got more need for different roles within a business. There does seem to be a bit more recognition. There's often a domino effect. So when one little firm does something and it's working quite well, the next firm wants to jump on it if it's effective. And I think they often do follow suit. So they're getting more recognition because there's becoming more of them. And that's how I have sort of found it, really.
Obviously, you said the law firms are saying, yes, okay, we want to bring paralegals in. We want them to be paralegals. That's their career choice and so on. We're not trying to push them all into being solicitors. But has there also been a shift in how they're perceived as a result of that? Or are paralegals still by the law firms perceived a little bit as, oh, well, they're down the bottom, aren't they? We don't have to worry about them.
I think it will differ from firm to firm, which is it's hard to say. There's not like a blanket rule. I will speak with some organisations that are really open and receptive to different roles and being forward thinking and looking at the different routes. Some, to be completely honest, will be a little bit more traditional and old fashioned, and that might be where you don't get the best experience. But I would personally go for the firms that are growing, and that you can maybe see, whether that's online or on blog posts, that they post more about paralegals, they're giving them the recognition. And then if I was a paralegal, that's the type of organization that I would want to work for or be in contact with. So it does really differ, which is hard to manage, because as a paralegal, you're not necessarily going to know which ones are open to it, but doing as much research as possible, seeing the roles that they've got advertised or the roles that they've got within each team, that will give you an idea of which ones are more open.
That's very good advice, actually, to say if they're talking positively externally, then they're probably talking positively internally as well. So that makes a lot of sense. Also about this kind of officially recognising seniority among paralegals. So I think in the past, I know that talking to, again, kind of older school solicitors and things, sometimes the paralegals within the company or within the firm actually were seen as really the experts in a particular area because they tended to specialise. And then that sort of disappeared. Are we seeing that come back again, where actually we're seeing the seniority? You know, there are entry-level paralegals and there are senior paralegals, and those senior paralegals are seen as equally knowledgeable to the solicitors and even maybe perhaps becoming partners in firms.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I feel like a paralegal, in my opinion, that has maybe focused on a particular area of law for, I don't know, 2, 3, or even 10 plus years, naturally they're going to have so much experience compared to an NQ, or sorry, a trainee that's maybe having 6 months within a seat. So I do think that that is being recognised. Naturally, if a firm is bigger, I feel like you've got probably more chance of being recognised as it warrants that extra role. Whereas if it's a quite a small firm, a high street firm that doesn't necessarily need to go down that route, then they might not. But from my experience, I am seeing a lot more roles advertised for senior paralegals or head paralegals now. And again, they are businesses that might have, for example, a conveyancing department where there are 15 plus solicitors and therefore a lot of support staff, rather than those support staff reporting to a solicitor. Having a head paralegal role might be really ideal because all of the more junior paralegals can go to the head paralegal. So I am certainly seeing a positive sort of shift in recognizing the seniority among the different paralegals.
So really good to know that they're recognizing them. Are they appropriately rewarding them? Are the salaries and the benefits and so on, are they commensurate with this recognition?
I still think there's work to do. I feel like entry paralegals, and when I say entry, maybe first time within the legal sector or sort of just coming out of university, are lower paid than career paralegals. However, I do think there's still work to do for those career paralegals that might have been within the industry, 10 plus years. I think from a law firm's perspective, paralegals roles paralegals charge out rates, if they are charged out, will be capped to some extent. Whereas I feel like solicitors are rewarded better because it's easier for them to quickly change their charge out rate. So there will be a cap, but I do feel like we are seeing more progression in terms of the benefits offered. So when I first started in recruitment, I often found that the paralegal roles I was working on maybe didn't offer the same amount of holidays or the same amount of benefits generally, whether that's private healthcare, whether that's being eligible for a bonus. In my opinion, and I can only speak for the firms that I work with, I feel like the benefits are becoming more across all levels, whether that's legal assistant, paralegals, solicitors. They'll always be a little bit more generous towards partners, as you can expect. But I feel like that is certainly an improvement that I'm seeing, which is good.
Yeah, that's definitely a positive thing, and I'm very pleased to hear that.
Yeah.
On that, you have previously spoken about paralegals taking on more roles because actually paralegals can do all sorts of things, but
Yeah.
traditionally they don't tend to. So are you seeing a kind of an expansion of that role, and if so, in what areas?
So I think it really, again, it depends on the firm. If you are part of a forward-thinking firm that allows people to get involved in different things, then that is great. So whether that is managing and supervising junior paralegals, as I mentioned previously, which relates quite nicely to the head paralegal role or the lead paralegal, some firms might say, they might have more client interaction. They might be heavily involved in networking. So a lot of the societies that I'm involved with might be the junior lawyers division. And when I attend those events, there's so many paralegals that are there. So as a paralegal, you might be the lead contact for that specific networking committee. You might be involved in risk and compliance. I think as long as you're part of a business that wants people to progress and are eager to see that, then there can be loads of different sort of things to be involved with. I know legal tech is becoming sort of a real big thing now. So if someone was really tech savvy, they would probably really want those skills and hone in on those as well. So yeah, there's definitely different responsibilities to be involved in.
And are employers now kind of actively looking for senior paralegals, or are they more kind of we get them in and then we progress them sort of thing? Do you know what I mean? Is that are they seeing that as a role very
I
specifically?
I would say I have a handful of clients that seem to be following trends. So just to mention before, my area that I focus on is the Thames Valley. So Reading is a very, very close-knit market. So one firm might have a senior paralegal role, and then the next firm sees that advertised and thinks, oh, actually, we should maybe go down that route. And that is genuinely what happens. It's a domino effect. So I use Reading as an example, but that would be the case in Leeds, it would be the case in Manchester, it would be the case in Oxford, any sort of legal hub that will make a difference. And they do sort of tend to follow suit. I think there's a long way to go in all firms recognizing the need for a senior paralegal, but I think we're definitely heading in the right direction. My personal take or experience is that I see a lot more senior paralegal roles or senior legal assistant roles within the property space, probably more than other areas. So if that is something that you want to get involved with, I would probably recommend having a look at the property legal space more than anything.
Well, there you go. Top tip. If you're looking to get into property, there's lots of opportunities. And if you're not sure about which area of paralegal law or which area as a paralegal you want to specialize in, then maybe law property is a good one to focus on, since there's clearly plenty of opportunity there. So thank you. Nice top tip. Do you think, what are you, for now, I have got lots of things I could say about this, but I'm going to ask you, what do you think some of the common misconceptions are about paralegals and senior paralegals?
I think the main one is that it's a stepping stone to another role. So many clients that I speak with might look at a CV and think, oh, well, they're just going to move on to the next thing. And that's a real sort of, I guess, barrier for them wanting to hire a paralegal. So I would say that is the main thing. I would also say that if people haven't gone down the training contract route, maybe they're not ambitious, which again is completely incorrect. And potentially that they don't feel, and this is true actually, I've spoken to many clients about this, that someone could be really satisfied within their job for a long period of time as a paralegal, which again is not the case. I speak with people who can make a real difference in a paralegal capacity. You're still heavily involved in serious areas of law, whether that is corporate and real estate and you want to go down that route, or whether it's a bit more personable and it's down the private client and family route. You can still get so much job satisfaction from making a real difference in people's lives. So I would say they're probably the main misconceptions that I come across anyway.
That is fascinating, because I think, us as NALP and also lots of our members, I think that would resonate definitely, is that people don't see it as something where, you're just doing this while you get something else, as it were. I suppose now, knowing that's also coming from the other side, it's not just our perception, it is actually coming from the other side. Yeah. I guess if you're then looking for a job, and this is kind of a recruitment question, it might, a paralegal job I'm talking about, it might be worth emphasizing in your covering letter that actually this is a role that you see as your future and you want to focus your career on being a paralegal. And I think the other thing to remember about that, and again, correct me if I'm wrong because you are the recruitment specialist, not me, is that even if you're saying that, it's not like you haven't signed a contract to say that you're never going to change your mind, if you see what I mean. So I think it's about, you get yourself in and then you may change your mind, and that's okay too.
Absolutely. I feel like that is the same for solicitors or any job. Nobody knows that a particular role is going to be their lifelong dream and that they're going to stay in for years and years. But I do think if you see yourself long term in a career paralegal role, it is worth emphasizing that in a covering letter. More generally, by the way, and I think it's important to add, throughout my whole time in legal recruitment, the amount of cover letters that I receive is really, really minimal. Most people just go in with a CV, and I know that a CV can often speak for itself, and that can wow a client generally. But if you want to go above and beyond and prove that your skill set is really suitable for this paralegal role and that you think you'd be able to be a great match for whatever reason, I would really, really recommend going down the cover letter route. It just seems to have gone out the window, really. I feel like that was really common when I was first searching for a role. But given the amount of paralegal roles and the amount of competition, if you want to stand out, that will certainly help.
That is, again, fascinating that you say that, because we've just been recruiting at NALP, and although I appreciate obviously what we were recruiting for was an admin role, not actually a paralegal role, I completely chose the candidates that I interviewed based on their covering letter. And if they didn't have a
Really?
covering letter, I just rejected them.
Yeah.
And I guess it sounds like
Yeah.
I'm not alone.
Yeah, no, definitely. In fact, somebody that I spoke with the other day, they said, "Oh, do I need a covering letter?" And it actually took me back, and I thought, "Oh, wow, okay." I didn't even know people were happy to do that, and it made a real difference. I sent the CV and the covering letter to the client, and even the client came back and said, "Wow, haven't received a covering letter in years." So that is sort of truth and something to really sort of take home from today, I think.
And it's funny enough, I was going to ask you, I've got a couple more questions, but one of them was kind of top tips to make yourself stand out, because obviously it is a highly competitive area. So I guess your top tip would be a good covering letter. Anything else?
Um, I would say give real examples of where you've made a difference. So if you are in a paralegal role at the moment and you're within a certain team, think of real examples of whether you've been involved in teamwork, whether you've been involved in improving a certain process within the area of law that you're in. Show real life examples of where you've added value rather than keeping it quite generic. I often see CVs that are quite, I guess, limited in the information that is provided, and that CV is your window of opportunity to get in front of a client. So as much detail as possible. I'd be intrigued to know your take on this, Chantel, actually, but I have never had feedback from a client where they've said, "Oh, that CV is too long." I feel like the more detail, the better, if of course it's relevant. Don't get me wrong, we don't want 15, 20 years of experience that's in a completely different industry that can't be, transferred over at all. But in general, the more detail, the better. What's your take on that?
Actually, yes, I would agree. I'm not. I mean, obviously, as you say, within reason.
Yeah.
I am not too worried about the length of the CV. As I said, because my general way of recruiting, both in my role as CEO of NELP and previously in other companies, is the covering letter. The covering letter sells it to me. If your covering letter is good, then I will look at your CV, because it will give me some extra information and backup. And then you're absolutely right. Then I do want information and detail, because now what I'm doing is I'm drilling into you a little bit more so that I know what to ask you at interview and stuff like that. So yes, I would concur.
And one thing to add to that is, when I have had cover letters, I think it's really, really important to remember that it has to be different to your CV. So it can't just be a complete recap or a copy and paste job in a different format. Really try think of something extra so that it complements. It's not just the same in a different format. I think that's really, really key to remember. Just finishing up with some of the sort of top tips, I would potentially get involved in some networking committees. As I mentioned before, the junior lawyers division that I'm heavily involved with within my area, so that happens to be Berkshire, Buckinghamshire, and Oxfordshire. A lot of the people that I speak with at those events are paralegals, they're legal assistants, they're in sort of support roles. So you don't actually have to be, or in my experience, you don't have to be a lawyer to join those committees. And that's just something extra to put on your CV. And to be honest, they're quite nice events as well. It's not they're not boring. It can often be whether that's quizzes or wine tasting or dinners or anything like that. It can be worth going to. And then maybe my last thing, which I think has gone down quite well, is if you have received, whether it's internal feedback from your peers or whether it's external feedback from clients, putting that on the end of a CV or maybe including that in a covering letter would be quite nice, about their experience working with you or the quality of work that you have produced. I think that just sort of backs up your argument really, and shows why you're potentially really good for the job. And not a lot of people, in my experience, do that, and I think it's a nice touch.
That all makes perfect sense. It would certainly work for me. So yeah, that's 2 votes for doing that. Where do you see the role of the senior paralegal kind of heading and evolving over the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years or so?
I'd like it to be more formal, and I'd like it to feel more common than somebody looking at that and thinking, "Oh gosh, I've never heard of that before." I want it to be sort of more across the board where most firms recognize it. So as I mentioned before, I do think that's likely to be in the larger practices where they can warrant a different sort of structure and warrant different titles rather than going for a really small practice that maybe only need, I don't know, the odd one or two. I'd like them to see, I'd like it to be more of a maybe a lead on tech or compliance or training, because a lot of paralegals have so much knowledge that can be shared in that area. And also, as you mentioned previously, paralegals are often in a particular area of law for a really decent chunk of time. So to become almost like knowledge experts within that area, I've seen a few firms go down the route of a support role, so a professional support lawyer or a knowledge lawyer. And I think there's definitely room for a knowledge paralegal as well, that you have just the same amount of experience, which I think is really key to recognise.
I'd like to see that too. So good. We're on the same page there. And I suspect all NALP members probably will be thinking exactly the same thing. So thank you for that. That's really fascinating and really helpful as well, if, you know, for people who are looking for a paralegal role, to know some of the things to do just to help yourself stand out. And I think the two takeaways for me there were good covering letter that's relevant, obviously, but also highlighting the fact that you are looking for a career as a paralegal, assuming that is what you are doing, rather than you're looking for it as a stepping stone. And that will help an employer understand that you're not going to be disappearing within a couple of years and they're going to put a lot of effort into you and then you're kind of out the window. So I'd say those were the two big takeaways. Thank you. And also really good to know that there is generally kind of getting it from a different source. It's always nice to know that how the law firms are perceiving paralegals, and that although they're always the dinosaurs, we know that, actually there is this kind of progression, and that can only be a good thing. So that's brilliant to know as well. So thank you so much. I'm going to now hand over to Nigel and see if there are any questions, which hopefully Faith can answer for you. So over to you, Nigel.
Somebody looking for a bit of a work-life balance thing, I think. Well, this person's got an LLB in law with politics, interested in a career in the legal field, but wants to have a bit better work-life balance than perhaps solicitors are renowned for not having.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. So I do think, well, a paralegal role, legal assistant roles, legal secretary roles, there'll be loads of positions like that available where you can hopefully get great job satisfaction from still being within the space that you want to, presuming that is legal, but without the crazy targets and the crazy, you know, hours on your back. I think that there'll be plenty out there, don't get me wrong. Again, I would look at the larger practices. They tend to have more need, I guess. In fact, that's not necessarily true. It really depends on the market, to be honest. So have a look online and see what is available or how busy the market seems to be. Don't just look on job adverts on sort of the careers page. Have a look at LinkedIn. A lot of law firms that I follow will post jobs on LinkedIn that they don't even put on their website. So hopefully that helps in a way as well, just to keep a little bit more up to date with the market.
That's awesome. I would just add as well that you're absolutely right, that being a paralegal is a really good way of working within the law, but not having to do the bonkers hours and targets and so on that your fellow solicitors might have to do. And that I've even seen, you know, part-time paralegal roles because they're working in a support capacity. So if you wanted to work shorter hours, say around school runs or have a day off a week or whatever, all of those kind of things are possible too. And although certainly the paralegals that I've spoken to, it's not that you never have to work late. You know, sometimes there is something big happening and you do have to, but I think it's far less common than when I speak to, say, my solicitor friends, one of whom, for example, has just given up being a practicing solicitor because she said, I can't stand this constant, you know, working till midnight. So yeah, I think paralegal is a good place to position yourself if you do want a better work-life balance.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I just want to say thanks again, Faith, for joining us today. That's Faith Kelly from the Sellick Partnership, who are recruitment specialists. As you say, Faith specifically works in the law area, so her insights have been really, really useful, because it's all very well looking at it from our point of view. It's kind of good to look at it from the other side too. So thank you so much for that. Thank you to everybody else who's joined us today as well. We hope you found that the webinar useful. And I very much hope to see many of you, including maybe even you, Faith, at National Paralegal Day this year. That would be fantastic to to have you guys there as well. So thank you very much to everybody for joining us. Thank you so much for your questions, and particularly thank you to Faith from the Sellick Partnership for all your expertise and being so kind of open and honest with where the industry is at the moment. And actually, I really get the feeling you care about paralegals, so thank you for that.
No worries at all. My pleasure.
Thank you so much, everybody. Hope to join you. Hope you'll join us again for our next webinar in June, and hopefully see you at National Paralegal Day. Thanks very much then.